But first, here at 6 o'clock, Senate Bill 43. It is a piece of legislation receiving a lot of attention at the state capitol and throughout California. Under limited circumstances, it would allow people experiencing severe mental illness to be held and treated against their will. And this evening, it is one step closer to becoming law after it passed committee today. Capitol Correspondent Eytan Wallace spoke with the bill's author and joins us now with what happens next.
Well, it's not very common to see Democrats and Republicans so united on an issue, but as it pertains to this legislation, members from both parties agree it will help get the most vulnerable the help they need. Tents, debris, most importantly, human beings. But it's how to help a specific group of those human beings that's now the center of a bill going through the legislature.
All of us feel disheartened when we see people that we clearly know need help. Like, how do we explain that to our children?
That's what Senator Susan Talamantes-Eggman says is the driving force behind her legislation, SB 43, all with the intent, she says, to get help to people living on the streets experiencing severe mental illness.
When people have severe mental health issues, oftentimes they can't even acknowledge that they have something wrong with them.
That's why she says the bill calls for reforms to the Lantrum and Petrus Short, or LPS Act of 1967. It allowed, under very limited circumstances, a process to determine if people experiencing mental health disabilities could be held and treated against their will. Eggman's bill would amend and modernize the 50-plus-year-old law, specifically changing how it defines someone who is, quote, gravely disabled.
Currently, the language is you need to be able to provide for your food, clothing, and shelter, which is kind of ambiguous. We are adding to that also your ability to provide for your self-protection and your medical care.
She says including that criteria as part of the law would allow more people living with mental illness to qualify for a court-issued conservatorship requiring they be taken to care facilities where they could be evaluated and given treatment.
The motion is due pass.
On Tuesday, the bill received approval from the Assembly Judiciary Committee, allowing it to move on in the legislative process. Members from both parties expressing support.
They need help, and we're not able to help them.
This is a big step in the right direction to make sure that our cities and our counties can deal with people who really need this help. They're in severe crisis.
Some critics have said the legislation could take away freedoms from those on the street, with opponents arguing the process to get someone care relies too much on hearsay as opposed to formal testimony.
It's not the best evidence. If a doctor says a patient is gravely disabled, shouldn't the doctor have to testify and be subject to cross-examination?
But Eggman maintains the proposal does give due process, all with the priority to save lives.
It is not compassionate. It is not progressive to let people die on the streets with their rights on. I think this will go a long way to really being able to reach those who need help the most.
And the legislation next heads to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Only with approval from there can it make it to the floor for a vote. Reporting from the state capitol, Eytan Wallace, 17 News.